My wife cheated with my business partner, stole $200, $0 from our joint account, and now she's secretly trying to claim half our estate. How do I protect my rights when she's already filed for divorce and hired a high-powered attorney? I never thought I'd be the guy to catch his wife cheating, let alone find out she'd been screwing around with my business partner and stealing $250,000 from our joint account. It all started with little things, missed calls, strange texts, late nights that she insisted were business trips or girls' nights. But I knew better. Something was off and I could feel it in my gut like a dull ache that wouldn't go away. Her name's Lisa. She's fiery, beautiful in a way that turns heads, but she's also manipulative, a real bitch when she doesn't get her way. We'd been married for 6 years and I thought we had a good thing going, until I started noticing her phone more often, hiding her messages, deleting call logs. It wasn't just a gut feeling anymore. I had concrete reasons to suspect she was sneaking around. Then came the day I found her phone lying on the kitchen table. I happened to glance at it while she was in the shower. There in her messages was a string of texts with my business partner, Mark. They were talking about meetings, secret plans, and most damning, a lot of flirtatious banter that crossed the line into sex talk. I felt this cold punch in my stomach. My wife and my partner, how could I have missed the signs? How could I have been so blind? I started digging deeper that night, accessing her email, her social media accounts. It was all there, the messages, the photos she sent Mark, the rendezvous plans. She'd been seeing him behind my back for months, probably longer. And the money, oh, the money. I checked our joint bank account. Over $200, $0 was missing, just gone. Not a single transaction I recognized. I knew she had to be involved somehow. It was like a punch to the gut, realizing she'd not only betrayed me emotionally but financially as well. I felt my world collapsing. I was furious, hurt, betrayed. Every emotion hit me at once. I couldn't believe the woman I loved was capable of this level of deception. She'd always played the victim, cried. When caught, lied through her teeth about the little things. But this was her biggest lie yet. I sat there staring at the bank statements, my mind racing with questions. How long had she been doing this? How much of our life savings was she planning to keep? And what about Mark? Was he just as much a part of this mess as she was? The next day, I confronted her. I waited until she came home from her meeting, a meeting that I now knew was just her sneaking off to see Mark. I told her I knew everything. Her face twisted into that familiar smirk, the one that said she thought she could lie her way out of anything. She denied everything at first, of course. Said I was paranoid, that Mark was just a business friend, that I was accusing her without proof. But I had the proof. I threw the phone on the table and showed her the messages, the bank statements, the missing money. Her reaction was classic Lisa. She started crying, claiming she was sorry, that she'd been under pressure, that Mark had been helping her with her career, and that I was overreacting. She blamed her infidelity on stress, on how I'd been distant lately, on her need for excitement. I could see her spinning her lies, trying to turn the tables as if she was the victim here, but I wasn't buying it. I was angry, yes, but more than anything, I was hurt. Hurt that she could do this to us, to everything we built together. After the confrontation, I felt numb. The betrayal was like a gut punch I couldn't shake. I kept replaying everything in my head, her sneaky texts, the stolen money, her lies. I wondered how I'd been so blind. I wondered if I'd missed the signs earlier or if she'd been planning this all along. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was financial, legal, personal. I knew I had to do something, and fast. I couldn't let her get away with this. Not without a fight. I decided I needed to protect myself, my assets, and my future. I didn't know exactly how I'd do that yet, but I knew I had to act quickly before she managed to spin more of her lies or claim something she didn't deserve. I spent that night awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything. The woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, had turned into someone I barely recognized. The anger was building, but so was a strange sense of clarity. I'd been betrayed in every way possible, but I wasn't going down without a fight. I'd find a way to get justice, to reclaim what was mine, and maybe, just maybe, to start over. After that night, I knew I had to get serious about protecting myself. Lisa's lies kept pouring in, trying to spin her way out of it. She insisted she was just stressed, that Mark was just a business partner, and that I was blowing things out of proportion. But I wasn't stupid. I knew the truth, and I knew she was lying. The evidence was there, glaring at me. She'd been sleeping around with Mark for months, probably longer, and she'd stolen a fortune from us in the process. I started by calling my lawyer the very next morning. I needed to understand my legal position, especially with her already filing for divorce. That was another slap in the face. She jumped the gun, probably trying to claim half our estate before I even knew what hit me. I could hear the tone of the lawyer's voice. It was calm but firm, warning me about the risks of her attempting to claim more than she was entitled to, especially given the financial theft. That $200, $0, that was a huge red flag. I had to freeze our joint account immediately, get a forensic accountant on the case, and start gathering every piece of evidence I could find. Meanwhile, Lisa was still pretending to be the victim. She was calling me paranoid, accusing me of trying to control her, and saying I was insecure about her success. She threw tantrums, crying, yelling, claiming she was doing everything for our family, even though I knew she was just trying to cover her tracks. I saw right through her act. I knew that behind her bitchy, manipulative exterior, she was a liar and a thief. She'd always been good at playing the victim when she was caught, but now her mask was slipping, and I was finally seeing her true colors. I decided to dig even deeper. I hired a private investigator, and within days he confirmed what I suspected. Lisa had been secretly meeting Mark at upscale hotels, even had a side apartment she'd been using for their rendezvous. The PI also uncovered bank transfers, large, unaccounted-for sums sent directly from our joint account into her personal accounts. It was clear she'd been planning this for months, banking on me trusting her. She played me for a fool, and now she was trying to claim half our estate, an estate she'd clearly helped drain. I also discovered that she'd been pushing to set up a new estate plan, trying to claim half of everything we'd built together. She hired a high-powered attorney, some shark who was already drafting papers to shield her interests. But I wasn't going down without a fight. I contacted my own lawyer, who advised me to file for an emergency injunction to freeze her assets and prevent her from making any claims to our estate until everything was sorted out. The emotional toll was brutal. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry all at once. I had trusted her, loved her, and built a life with her. And in a matter of months, she'd turned into someone I barely recognized, someone capable of lying, cheating, and stealing. I kept asking myself how I missed the signs, how I didn't see the warning flags, but I also knew I had to stay focused. I couldn't let her manipulate the system or spin more lies. I had to be strategic. Over the next few days, I stayed on top of everything. I kept the pressure on, pushing my lawyer to act quickly. I also started documenting every encounter, every message, every suspicious transaction. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that Lisa was not just cheating on me. She was trying to take everything I had worked for. I felt a mixture of rage and despair. Rage because I'd been played, and despair because I didn't know how deep this rabbit hole went. I also made a decision. I wasn't going to let her walk away with a dime more than she deserved, which frankly was probably nothing given her betrayal. I'd fight her in court, expose her lies, and protect my assets. But I also knew I had to prepare myself emotionally for whatever was coming. This wasn't just a legal battle, it was a personal one. I'd trusted her, loved her, and now I was realizing I'd been blind to who she really was. Still, I owed it to myself to fight for what's right, for my dignity, and for whatever future I could salvage from this chaos. In the meantime, I kept my distance from her. No more late-night talks, no more explanations. I was done playing her game. I could feel her desperation mounting, and that only fueled my resolve. I knew this was just the beginning, and I had a long road ahead. But I was already planning my next moves, knowing that the truth would come out and she wouldn't get away with it. Not this time. The days that followed were a blur of legal meetings, late-night research, and trying to keep my head above water emotionally. Every time I thought I had a grasp on what was happening, something new would come up that made everything even messier. Lisa's lies kept coming, each one more outrageous than the last. She'd deny everything, then flip and accuse me of trying to ruin her, as if I was the one cheating, stealing, and scheming behind her back. It was infuriating. I couldn't believe how easily she lied, how she twisted everything to make herself look like the victim even when the evidence was staring her in the face. I spent hours combing through bank statements, phone records, and emails. I wanted to be prepared for whatever she threw at me in court. I knew she'd try to claim that the missing money was a misunderstanding, or that she'd needed it for emergencies that I'd supposedly ignored. But I had proof, screenshots of her secret conversations with Mark, copies of wire transfers, and witness statements from the pie. I was building a case and I had to stay one step ahead of her. Meanwhile, Lisa kept pushing her narrative. She'd call me controlling, jealous, and paranoid, accusing me of spying on her, which I was guilty of because I knew she was lying. She even started telling friends and family that I was an unfaithful, insecure loser who couldn't handle her success. The more she lied, the more I saw her true colors emerge. She was petty, manipulative, and she had zero regard for the damage she was doing to our marriage and our finances. One day, I caught her in a big lie. She told everyone she was trying to fix things, but I had proof she was meeting Mark again, this time at a hotel downtown. I confronted her with the evidence. Her face turned red with rage and she screamed at me, calling me crazy, possessive, and obsessed. I just stared at her, feeling a strange mix of disgust and pity. She was so good at spinning her web of lies, it was almost impressive. But I wasn't falling for it anymore. I also learned that she'd been secretly transferring money into her own accounts, large sums, more than I'd ever imagined. I hired a forensic accountant to trace every penny. The results were shocking. She'd moved about $150, $0 into various offshore accounts and cash advanced some of it. She planned this, I realized. She'd been preparing to cut ties and leave me with nothing. And all the while she kept up her act, crying, begging, claiming she was sorry and needed help. But I saw through her. I knew she was trying to cover her tracks, to hide her trail before I could catch her. I also discovered that she'd been pushing to get a divorce quickly, probably to avoid the fallout of her actions. She hired a high-powered attorney, someone who specialized in high-net-worth divorces, and she had already filed papers. I had no choice but to respond swiftly. I filed my own motions, asking the court to freeze her assets, to prevent her from claiming anything more than her fair share, and to investigate the theft of our joint funds. The legal battle was about to get even uglier, and I knew I had to be prepared for her to try to spin it all in her favor. Emotionally, I was drained. I'd gone from feeling betrayed and angry to feeling numb. I kept asking myself how I could have missed the signs, how I didn't see that she was capable of all this. I'd given her everything, my trust, my love, my money, and she'd repaid me with deceit. It was a hard pill to swallow. I'd been so committed to making our marriage work, even when things felt off, but now I realized she'd been planning her escape for months, and she'd done it all while pretending to be the loving wife. Despite everything, I refused to be broken. I knew I had to stay strong for myself and for whatever future I could salvage. I had to protect my assets, my reputation, and my sanity. I also started thinking about how I could rebuild my life once this was all over. I'd lost a lot, but I still had my dignity and my ability to move on. The betrayal was a wound, yes, but I was determined not to let it define me. Looking back, I see how naive I'd been. I trusted her blindly, told myself she was just stressed or overwhelmed. But now I see she was manipulative and calculating from the start. She played her part well, but her mask is finally falling off. I'm still angry, still hurt, but I also feel a strange sense of clarity. This whole mess has shown me what kind of person she truly is, and that I need to focus on my own healing, no matter how hard that might be. I can't change what she did, but I can control how I respond. That's what I'm trying to do now. The legal process moved faster than I expected, and suddenly I was sitting across from my lawyer in a conference room, going over the preliminary motions. She had filed for divorce, trying to claim half of everything, including some assets I'd worked years to build. But I had the evidence, proof of her affair, the stolen money, her attempts to hide assets, and I made sure my lawyer knew it. We prepared to contest her claims, especially since she had already started spinning her lies to friends and family, painting herself as the wronged wife. I could see her doing interviews, crying crocodile tears, claiming I'd been a terrible husband, all while secretly plotting her escape. The day I got the court order to freeze her assets was a relief, but also a wake-up call. I knew she'd try to come up with new schemes to get around it. She was relentless, calling her attorney every hour, trying to intimidate me, even threatening to go public with stories that would ruin my reputation. But I was ready. I had my own team of legal professionals now, and we were prepared to fight her every step of the way. Meanwhile, I kept digging into her financials. Every day I uncovered something new, another transfer, another offshore account, a hidden stash of cash. I found out she'd been planning her exit for months, siphoning money slowly so I wouldn't notice. It made me sick. To think she'd been so calculating, using my trust against me, all while pretending to be the loving wife. The more I found out, the angrier I got. I felt like I'd been played for a fool, and now I was fighting to reclaim what was mine. One of the worst moments was when I discovered she'd been trying to claim half of our estate, even though she had actively stolen from it. She'd been filing papers, trying to get her name on everything, and I knew I had to act fast. I hired a forensic accountant to trace every dollar, and it turned out she'd transferred a significant portion of the stolen money into her sister's account, planning to hide it from the court. I couldn't believe how deep her deception went. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. It was about theft, betrayal, and manipulation on a grand scale. Her attorney was aggressive, trying to dismiss my evidence, claiming that I was overreacting or that she deserved her share of the estate because she was entitled to it. But I had the law and the proof on my side. I filed motions to expose her financial fraud, and I was determined to see justice done. I knew she'd try to spin her narrative, but I had enough to counter her every move. I also started preparing for depositions, gathering witnesses who could testify to her lies and her secret meetings with Mark. Emotionally, I was a wreck some days. I'd go from feeling outraged to feeling numb, then back again. I kept questioning how I missed the signs, how I didn't see that she was capable of all this. But I also knew that dwelling on the past wouldn't help. I had to stay focused, keep my head clear, and fight for my rights. I was starting to realize that this wasn't just about the money or the betrayal. It was about reclaiming my dignity. I refused to let her manipulate the system or walk away with a penny more than she deserved, which was probably nothing at this point. I also made a conscious decision to distance myself emotionally from her. I stopped engaging in her lies, stopped trying to reason with her. Every time she called or texted, I would ignore or block her. I knew she was trying to get under my skin, to manipulate me into giving her more leverage, but I was done playing her game. I realized that she was only going to keep digging herself deeper, and I had to let the legal process do its job. The truth was coming out, and I had to stay strong, no matter how much she tried to sway the narrative. One thing I learned through all of this is that trust is fragile. I'd always believed in honesty and loyalty, but now I see how dangerous it is to ignore the signs of deceit. I also learned that people are capable of incredible betrayal when they think they can get away with it. But I also learned that strength comes from knowing the truth and fighting for what's right. I might have lost a lot, but I still have my integrity, and I intend to see this through to the end. I owe it to myself to stand tall, no matter how messy or painful this process gets. This betrayal has changed me, but I refuse to let it define me. The months dragged on, and every day brought a new twist in this mess. I thought I had seen it all, her lies, her schemes, her attempts to hide assets. But then I uncovered something even more shocking. She had been secretly working with a shady lawyer on a side deal to settle quickly and walk away with a hefty sum, trying to bypass the court order. I found emails, encrypted messages, even a forged document that claimed she owned a large piece of property I never knew about. It was like a chess game, and she was trying to make a move that would leave me completely powerless. I knew I couldn't let her get away with this. I pushed harder in court, demanding full disclosure of all her hidden assets, and I filed motions to revoke her access to any funds she tried to transfer. I also subpoenaed her financial records, and the truth started coming out in a flood. I learned she had been funneling money into offshore accounts, setting up shell companies, and even trying to buy herself a new identity in another state. She was desperate to escape the consequences of her actions, but I was determined to stop her. Meanwhile, her lawyer was throwing everything he had at me: motions to dismiss, claims of irreparable harm, and accusations that I was harassing her. It was exhausting, but I stayed focused. I had the evidence, and I knew the law was on my side. Every day, I worked with my legal team to prepare for depositions, court hearings, and eventually, the trial. I also hired a forensic financial investigator to trace every dollar she had stolen, which proved she'd drained more than I initially thought, closer to $250, $0, including some cash withdrawals I hadn't noticed before. Emotionally, I was drained. There were days I felt like giving up, like the pain and betrayal were just too much. I trusted her with everything, my business, my life, and she'd spent months lying, cheating, and stealing from me. It was hard to accept that the woman I loved could become this manipulative, greedy stranger. I was angry, yes, but also deeply hurt. I kept asking myself how I could have been so blind, how I missed the signs, how I could have loved someone so unrecognizable. But I also learned a lot about myself. I'd always believed in honesty and loyalty, but now I see the importance of being cautious, of protecting myself from people who might not have my best interests at heart. I realized that sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when it feels impossible. I also learned that justice isn't always swift, but it's worth fighting for. I wasn't just fighting for my money or my reputation. I was fighting to reclaim my life, to prove that I wouldn't be a victim of her lies and greed. The biggest breakthrough came when I finally got a court order to seize her assets and freeze her accounts. She was furious, of course, and started throwing more tantrums, trying to turn friends and family against me. But I stayed calm. I knew I had the truth, and I knew I'd come out on top if I kept fighting. I also made sure to document everything: her threats, her manipulations, her attempts to hide money, so I'd have a solid case when it all went to trial. Looking back, I realize this has been a journey of shock, anger, and ultimately, resilience. I never thought I'd be in this position, but I learned that people can surprise you, sometimes in the worst ways. I also learned that the only way to deal with betrayal like this is to confront it head-on, with honesty and determination. I've been hurt deeply, but I refuse to let her steal my future. I'm stronger now, more cautious, and more aware of what real loyalty looks like. And no matter how much she tries to spin her stories, I know the truth. That's what keeps me going, even on the darkest days. The final court date finally arrived, and I could feel the tension thick in the air. All the evidence I'd gathered, the lies she'd spun, the stolen money, everything was laid out before the judge. Lisa looked nervous, her usual bitchy attitude replaced with a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. She tried to pull out all her tricks, crying, pleading, claiming she was the victim of my paranoia, but none of it held up against the mountain of proof I had. I sat there, feeling a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion, knowing that this nightmare was nearing its end. When the judge finally announced the ruling, it was clear and decisive. She ordered her to pay back every cent she'd stolen, plus interest, and awarded me full custody of all our shared assets. Her attempts to claim half our estate were dismissed outright. Her lawyer had no leg to stand on after all the evidence of her financial fraud. The court also ordered her to stay away from any of our property and to cease all contact unless through legal channels. It was a victory of sorts, but not without its scars. As she was led out of the courtroom, I saw the wreckage of her facade. The bitchy, manipulative woman I once loved was gone. In her place was a woman who had betrayed everything we built, who'd lied and stolen her way out of a life she once claimed to cherish. I felt a strange sense of closure, but also a deep sadness. I'd lost a lot, my trust, my stability, my sense of security, but I'd gained my dignity back. In the aftermath, I started rebuilding. I focused on healing, on figuring out how to move forward without her. I closed the chapter on our marriage, and I also began the long process of repairing my financial and emotional life. I hired professionals to help me sort out my finances, to ensure she wouldn't come back trying to claim more. I also leaned on friends and family, people who knew the real story and supported me through the worst of it. Slowly, I felt the weight lifting, and I realized I was stronger than I thought. Looking back, I see this experience as a brutal lesson in trust and resilience. I learned that people are capable of incredible betrayal, but I also learned that I have the strength to fight back. I learned not to ignore the warning signs and to protect myself better in the future. Most importantly, I learned that sometimes, the only way to truly move on is to face the pain head-on, confront the lies, and stand firm in your truth. I hope anyone reading this who's going through something similar knows they're not alone. Betrayal cuts deep, but it doesn't have to define your future. You can come out the other side stronger and wiser. Trust is fragile, but it can be rebuilt if you're willing to do the work. And in the end, no matter how dark things seem, there's always a chance for a new beginning. You just have to be brave enough to seize it.